Electric cars are no good for long distance. The batteries catch fire, you have to chuck them away. They're expensive, they cost more to run. We hear all this stuff all the time, but is it all true? This is a Tesla Model 3 Performance that's now over 4 years old, over 100,000 miles on it. It's one of our own cars, we run it in the fleet here, and it's still in daily use. It's still dirty, look. But in this video, I'm going to actually test this car. I'm going to plug it in and see exactly how the battery is holding up. Now this car, I know already, has had 38% of its charging via DC rapid charging, more than most would, a higher percentage. And that's also a bit harder on the battery. So how is that holding up? What does it cost to run? How much is it depreciated by? What have we had to do to it to maintain it? Well, that's all coming up in this video. Do we need to just chuck this car away now because it's electric and it's no good for high mileage? Well, I don't think so. Stay tuned to find out. My name's Richard and this is RSEV and this is our Model 3 long range performance. So we call this car Clint Beastwood and he's been a great car. We do like him, but let's get down to the details. The numbers will speak for themselves in a little bit. Before I get into some of the data behind it all, let's just have a look at condition. Now, he's white, and the benefit of white cars is that they really don't show much in the way of stone chips, swirls. You don't have to just kind of look after the paint as much. It's really good. So actually white cars, I know they're the most common colour for Teslas. It still looks good today. There isn't really any particular stone chipping. It's obviously going to have a few little bits, but he's looking good. He's all right. He's doing all right there. Coming around the side, original brake pads, original brake discs. I'll come on to the maintenance that we've done on this car in the meantime. He's looking all right. The only bit really that's cosmetically a little bit challenged is that because this is an early car and it didn't fit mud flaps, there's a bit of stone chipping on the front edge of this sill here. So a bit of the paint has come away there. But to be honest, that would be a really nice and cheap and simple repair. Later cars were fitted with mud flaps, so that would usually prevent that. But otherwise, he's done all right. He's never had any major accidents or repairs. He's used every day. It's a family car, a working car, and he's all right. The only other thing you'll find on some of the Model 3 Performances is that the lacquer can peel from this carbon fibre spoiler. We had it on this one. All we actually did in the end was just pick off the rest of the sort of flaky lacquer. In fact, the bit's just come off there. And then you just lift with the carbon fibre. It's been like that for a while now. It's fine, it's all good. So actually it's right. Now this is a Fremont made car. In fact, I know he was made at 11:58 p.m. on the 22nd of August 2019. That's just some of the data we can pull off the car when it's plugged in. I can also even tell how many times his wiper blades have swept the windscreen. So if you want to make a guess, it's got 103,500 miles in now. How many times have these wiper blades swept the windscreen? Have a little think about that, and I'm going to give you the answer later on in the video when we plug the car in. What about the inside? How is the steering wheel and seat held up? I don't have my phone on me to unlock it. I'll go and get that, I'll tell you. Looking at the steering wheel here first, really good condition. It's got no issues at all. In fact, it still looks fresh and new. I have seen some where you get a little bit of peeling from the kind of top layer in here, or sometimes scratches from people's rings, but this steering wheel, good as new, it's not even shiny. And then let's have a look at the seat, because after 103,000 miles, you expect the seat to be a bit shabby, but you should be able to see here, it's all fine. The padding is still fine, the bolsters haven't split, there's no particular wear that, it's still supportive. It's all good, there's no issues with it, it's fine. I've seen a couple of cars where you get a bit of wear as you come in from the edge here, but this one, again, is all okay. In fact, Joe needs to vacuum his car. It's a bit dusty and dirty in here, but you can see the wear and tear on it's really good. I also would have thought this black center console that you got on these earlier cars would be really terribly scratched by now, being glossy black, but actually even this is okay. So apart from showing dust and fingerprints, that's okay. It's actually held up really well. And I can tell you now, when you drive this car, it doesn't squeak, it doesn't rattle, and everything still feels solid. The steering's solid, the center console's still solid. See, that doesn't move. And it's held up beautifully well. It doesn't squeak, doesn't rattle, still drives really brilliantly, no problem at all. You might have noticed there's two small modifications in here that we've done ourselves. This Alcantara dashboard panel here replaces the original wooden trim that you get with the black interior cars. I'm not a big fan of the wooden trim. We sell and fit this Alcantara dash, and we've also fitted a swivel screen here, look, so you can just move the screen slightly towards the driver. And I really like having that, especially as well if you've got a bit of sun glare, you can just move that around. That's a nice little mod. But in here, back seats as well, everything is actually good. I think if I said to you this car had 15,000 miles in it, you wouldn't argue with me. It all looks good, all the switch gear, everything is held up really well. So does Tesla really have bad build quality? I actually think it's very good. Sometimes people mistake this minimalist look for bad quality. It just doesn't have all the pretend metal bits like you get on some cars. But in terms of its durability and longevity, I don't think you can fault it. So let's talk about maintenance. How much have we had to spend on this car? It's still a car at the end of the day. It still has wear and tear items that you need to maintain. So the odd wiper blade, tyres. Well, we run the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, which were what were original in this car, and they're the best tyres. The later cars had the Pirellis, and we're just not as much of a fan as them. They got that kind of stretched tyre look, and we've done a couple of track days in this car, I'll be honest with you, and the Pirellis were nowhere near as good as these Michelin, so I recommend sticking to these Michelin tyres, and they're not particularly cheap. They're £250 each. How long do they last? It depends how you drive it, of course, and if you do things like track days, but typically I would say 15 to 20,000 miles. It's often worth swapping the fronts to the rear at about halfway through that time, so that then you replace all 4 at a time. The reason for that is you can often get a bit of a deal if you buy 4 tyres at once. So typically about 15 to 20,000 miles between these tyres, and these ones are a bit expensive, about £250 each, but they're very, very good. Right, but what about other maintenance aside from wiper blades and tyres? With Tesla, it's strange. There's no real service routine. You don't have to take it for a service every year, 12,000 miles or anything like that. There isn't really any servicing, but you do have to maintain it. And actually, this is needed very, very little. We had to replace a seat pad sensor. It's a pad, a sensor under the seat pad there, which detects when you're in and out of the car. It's really quite important because that's how Tesla knows you're out of the car and to turn off and lock itself. One of those, £10. And we actually changed it ourselves. It's a bit of a fiddle. You have to kind of take the seat base off, but it can be done yourself, or Tesla don't charge too much to do that. We had also suspension bushes, because really that's the one thing you do get on the Model 3. It still has suspension bushes like any car, and you do have to maintain and repair the odd bush. We only recently did that, so it did about 103,000 miles on this one. I have heard of them needing changing before that, so it can happen before, but this one actually was good. And we spent £1,165 plus VAT, having front lower arms, rear upper arms, and then a 4-wheel alignment after that as well. So including VAT, just over £1,500. And then we also had to have one thing to repair, i.e. fix. It isn't generally a wear and tear item, and that was the oil pump. And it sounds strange saying oil pump in an electric car, but yes, there is a little bit of oil that circulates around the front motor and the output gearbox and the rear motor and the output gear in there. The rear oil pump on this failed. The car didn't break down, and I think it came up with a message on the dash. Tesla remotely connected to that and then diagnosed it, ordered the part in. So it ended up going in, I think, pretty much next day and was done very quickly. Well done, Tesla. Brilliant prompt service there. And that was a total of £397 plus VAT, so not too bad. So actually, when you add all this up, we spent under £2,000 in repairs and maintenance if you put tyres and wiper blades aside from that. So I think really very good. I keep saying how reliable they are very good. There's little kind of common issues that happen with the Model 3s. They're very, very good like that. But how much does it cost to run in charging? Well, let's cover that one. So there's a lot of variables when it comes to this, because it depends where you charge and how much you pay for it. You might have solar like we have now. This is charging off our solar. Usually when you have an electric car, you will have a cheap overnight electricity tariff for something like 7.5 pence per kilowatt hour. But then you've also got supercharging, which can be more expensive. Now, like I say, so many variables. Let me give you a couple of examples here. For it to cover 100,000 miles in 4 years, that's 68 miles every single day of driving. It's obviously going to vary, but let's average it out. Now, if you did 68 miles every single day, you could charge from a home cheap overnight tariff. In theory, you could then do 100,000 miles at a grand total cost of, I've written it down, did the calculations, £2,419. But let's be realistic. There's going to be days where you don't use it, there's days you do longer journeys, and there's days where you can use public chargers. And that percentage will vary. Now, this car has actually had quite a large proportion of fast DC charging, primarily at Tesla superchargers. 38% of its charging has in fact been by DC rapid charging. And of course, that's not so good for the battery, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But if you take a kind of ratio of the days that you really are on a longer trip or on a family holiday, you're going to do a little bit and you're going to be charged for that, and it's more expensive. Now, I can't get the exact figures for this car because ultimately, because of my Tesla referral code that gets used, and I help people buy a new Tesla and they use my referral code, which I'll put in the comments below in the description, it gives me some credits which I can then buy supercharging miles for. So I've actually had free Tesla supercharging, but a lot of people wouldn't, and it would have to be paid for. And depending on the proportion, let's say you do about 15% of your charging is from DC rapid charging, I think you should allow that if you're going to cover 100,000 miles in a car like this, you're going to have a cost of about £4,000, maybe £4,500. There's going to be a lot of people that could probably comment below and put their running costs for their cars as really good examples. And it all depends, I say, where you charge and how much it costs you. For me though, it's cost very, very little. And in fact, by some of my quick calculations, if you were to do 100,000 miles in a pretty efficient petrol or diesel car, let's say a 45 miles per gallon car, that would probably cost you more like £15,000 just in petrol or diesel alone. So some big savings to be had, aren't there? Big savings. And there's also other savings. Zero road tax, although road tax is going to be implemented on electric cars from April 2025. But we've had zero road tax. You also don't have to pay to go into central London and other congestion zones. If you run one of these, you buy one through a business, you can also claim first year capital allowance when you buy a new electric vehicle. So from new, and this was £50,000, you could take 20% off that at the time. It's now 25% of saving from first year capital allowance. Now you do have to repay when you sell, but if you keep the car long term, you can make a massive saving. And then if you drive one of these as a company car, you're probably going to pay, let's give an example, about £20 per month in benefit in kind tax compared to probably £200 a month if you run something like a petrol or diesel BMW with a little bit of performance to it. So there's some huge savings if you're going to drive one as a company car. Go electric, it really is good. And don't say you can't do high mileage, because you can. I picked up one of these brand new in 2019 from West Drayton Tesla, and it had a 100% charge in it, and that showed 297 miles of potential range. So I'm going to charge this up now to 100% until it will not take any more charge, and let's see what the car tells us then. But then we'll go one step further. We're going to go and plug the car in and see exactly how the battery is standing up for usable capacity since it was new. Plus, we've also got an independent battery health check. So it's not just our data, but an independent service which has actually connected this car remotely and read how healthy the battery is. So I've got an indication from that what it might be, but let's find out those other comparisons in just a few minutes. Right, so it's now finished charging. It's gone as far as it can go until the car stopped itself. So we're now at 100% state of charge, and we have 285 miles of range. Compared to the 297 when it was new, or when I picked up a new one. It wasn't exactly this car, but so that is 96% of its range. But that's according to the car and what it displays. What we've done now is we've connected a dongle via the ODB port down here, and Serge here has got some numbers for us, which we're actually reading the live battery data at the moment. And so this should be pretty accurate. Now we've got here, if we have a look at the, I'll tell you what, let's do how many cycles the wipers have done. Now, the interesting thing is we've plugged this car in before and it's changed quite a lot since then, so I don't entirely trust this. But according to this, as we are now, the wipers have cycled 561,600 times. The thing is, only recently it said 318, it hasn't rained that much. It's rained a lot, but not that much. So we don't quite trust that number, but if you guessed 500,000-ish, then I'll give you a point. Right, okay, if you go to the current battery data then. So this will tell us here that we've got a nominal, new battery capacity, including buffers, of 77.8 kilowatt hours. And that is located, you can see it's a whole load of numbers. And I've got to say, every time people kind of interpret these numbers, you do get variances and different opinions of how you should calculate it. But right, battery when it was new, we got there 77.8, all right? Now there is a 4.8 kilowatt hour buffer, so if you took that off of the 77.8, you'd end up with 73.72 kilowatt hours new. Now you can see here we're 100% charged with usable 65.9. So 65.9 from the original theoretical 73.72 usable. That's 100% to zero. Remember there is this 4 kilowatt hour buffer, but let's just use that. That would give us 89.4% of battery remaining. Some say use the full pack, including the buffer, because in theory, if you charge as maximum it can go and keep driving until it literally doesn't move anymore, you're going to use the buffer as well. In that case, you're looking at 89.7%. So we're looking just under 90% in theory, battery health based on these numbers here. Right, have that one back for a moment if you're getting the good data. Oh yeah, we'll come on to how much AC and DC charging. But firstly, we also had a test done on battery health by via Clevery, and this is a test powered by Altelium, who do battery testing, and they did this remotely actually, connected the car remotely and gave us a state of health of 89% as well. So again, there's some different interpretations of data. That's us looking at the battery now. This was from about 2 weeks ago, I think, wasn't it? Something like that. So let's say, okay, it's lost about 10%. Now, what's really important here is battery degradation curves. There's a lot of cars, especially in the States, with very high mileage. And actually, it's not a linear curve. So every 100,000 miles, you don't lose 10%. The data actually looks like you lose actually a bit initially, and then it steadies off. So in fact, out of the 10%, say this is lost, just for the sake of rounded numbers, it probably lost 6-7% of that in the first 15-20,000 miles. Yeah. And actually since then it hasn't been that much, I shouldn't think, and according to a lot of data that has already been gathered, and presumably will continue to, it will gradually lose a bit, but probably at a much more steady rate. So after probably another 100,000 miles, it might still be at 85%, for example. We'll find out, probably. We'll keep this car and keep running it. So the interesting thing here is that let's just show the proof of how much DC versus AC charging. So this is the DC charging total here. It's 12,626 kilowatt hours of DC versus 20,773 kilowatt hours of AC charging. You see here, we've also regened 6,655 kilowatt hours. So that is, you lift off the accelerator, and rather than using friction brakes to slow the car down, it's using the motor becomes a generator, and it's created nearly 7,000 kilowatt hours of energy. So that's good. But what is quite a high number there is the DC charging versus AC charging, and that works out to, something I did earlier, 38% DC, which is far more than normal. I think most people, I mean, some people very rarely DC charge, some more than others, depends what you have for work and home charge and that sort of thing. But DC charging, because it's rapid, and this car can still pull 250 odd kilowatts charging speed, can't it? It's still good. It's a harder strain for the battery. So this battery health is with a car that has been DC charged a lot, actually. We don't normally charge to 100%. We normally do an 80 or 90%, but the car's in regular use, day in, day out. You know, real world in that sense, quite intensive usage, but with quite a lot of DC. And again, I will reiterate, because I have some free supercharging miles on my Tesla account because of the referral credit use, and you can do the same if you can refer your code across and people use it, you can buy yourself some free supercharging. We've probably actually used supercharging more than most would, because ultimately, I've got to be honest, you know, I'll be travelling back from somewhere and I go, well, that's free, I can do it with a coffee and a break anyway, so I charge it. Whereas if I was paying for it, I'll be honest, there's more times I will travel home. I've never done that when the superchargers are busy. I will carry on, just go home and charge there. It doesn't cost much, but yeah, we've charged more than normal, and we haven't had this car from brand new as well, so the most intensive mileage was actually in the first couple of years of this car's life, and they obviously did DC charge rather a lot. I do know, I was in contact with the previous person about maintenance, and they didn't have anything done, which is good. They did replace 2 alloys because they damaged them. Other than that, that was it. So with some pretty intensive supercharging use, 90%, I think when you go 89, 90%, you go, oh, that sounds a lot, but actually I think it's all right. You know, so let's talk real world numbers. So the car might have shown 297, now shows 285. When I first got mine, I remember, realistically speaking, you're talking a real world maximum range of kind of 275, 280, that's kind of what I had. Take 10% off of that, you're looking at about 245, 250 mile range, which I think is quite a realistic range for this car now. So it makes sense. And then another 100,000 miles, it might lose another 5%, something like that. So is it an issue? No, it's fine. Still charges really fast. After 250 miles of driving, that's still really a lot. That's here to the other side of Leeds. You know, it's more than the bladder can take, and you normally stop to eat and drink anyway, so breakfast, lunch, dinner. So it is an issue. That's why we continue to use the car day in, day out. There we have it. That's the battery data. So one other thing to consider is how much power you might lose from a combustion car over age and mileage. As things wear out a little bit, they tend to lose a few horsepower. This should be pretty much exactly the same. So we've just taken it out, we've got our draggy here, and we had a video from a couple of years ago where we drove a fairly new low mileage 2019 Model 3 Performance. We got 3.4 seconds 0 to 60, real world. Not, obviously the Tesla quote 3.2 at the time, but that's kind of optimal conditions, possibly including the 1 foot rollout. This is actual 0 to 60 miles an hour. And we managed to get 3.45 just now, which is only 5/100ths of a second difference. So I would go so far as to say it's as quick today as it ever has been. And you wouldn't get that with a combustion car, would you? It's bloody fast, isn't it? Of course, one of the biggest costs for ownership of these is depreciation. We see about how electric cars are depreciated and such like. So this car new, £50,000. Today it's worth about £20,000. So it's lost about £30,000 in value in that 4 years, 103,000 miles. Not brilliant, but I tried to find some comparisons. So I was looking on Auto Trader, for example, and trying to find cars of a good bit of performance. So BMW M3, M4, I don't know, something like that. And you don't see those that are 4 years old with over 100,000 miles. So if you broaden it out and you look at cars like maybe a BMW 330D, nowhere near as quick as the 3.2 seconds of this 0 to 60, but nonetheless a pretty powerful car. And you see some of those at about 4 years, 100,000 miles, and they've lost probably at least £30,000 from the ones I've seen. So the age and mileage for the distances covered and depreciation seems to be quite comparable to other things like that. But what else is there that can do this kind of performance at that cost? And it was actually when I was searching for those comparisons, I realised there isn't anything else. If you look at it, there is not many cars that offer this level of performance with that level of running cost, that little maintenance, and the mileage this has covered. It's just not out there. And that's where I think you've got to take your hats off to Tesla, and that's where I think we have to appreciate what this car has done. It's a very high performance car that it can take the kids to school, but it can do a track day. It's very cheap to run, costs nothing to maintain really in the scheme of things, far less than a petrol and diesel. And yet we're here with over 100,000 miles now. Do I intend to sell it or get rid of it? Is it no good anymore? Absolutely not. It's a brilliant car, absolutely brilliant. We still use it day in, day out, and we don't intend to sell it. The next question is, well, what happens when the battery comes out of warranty? Now, Tesla warrant the battery in this car until 8 years, I think 120,000 miles. When you get to that age of mileage there are now third-party warranty options. Again, they can do a remote battery test and then quote you for a battery extension warranty. And it's not that expensive. We're talking a few £100, not a few £1,000s. Even then, there are used battery packs. There are specialists that can change modules. Work and maintenance can be done on these. The same as any combustion car at 200,000 or 300,000 miles might need some maintenance or engine work. Now, apparently the batteries in this, quoted by Elon, are good for 300,000 to 500,000 miles. And then there'll be options to repair and maintain or even replace. It's not going to be in the world. In the meantime, you've just saved an absolute fortune by having this car. And it's just been brilliant to drive as well. Don't forget, it's just a good car to drive. So there we have it. This is Clint. He's covered a few miles. He's done really well. We love him. He's a great car. And I think this is where we're now recognising you can have the performance and high mileage and low running costs. And who can argue that? Really? I think it's great, and we're going to keep him. So I hope that's been a useful, interesting video. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel because we do lots of EV comparisons and reviews. So make sure you're subscribed. A surprising number of viewers are not. So hit that button now. Also follow us on all the social medias. Just look for RSEV. And then hopefully we'll see another video very soon.